Welcome to the Tenant Podcast. I'm Todd Pearson here in Denver, Colorado, joined by my good friend, partner, and brother, the one and only Wes Brown.
Hey, Todd, it's good to see you. Hey, this week, if you're tuning in first thing Thursday morning, yesterday was the new inauguration, a new president, new light on everything. So I know that's going to be some challenging for some people, but let's have patience. Let's get through this and let's be kind. That's what I got to say.
Well said. I was thinking this morning, I was having a moment of gratitude. And my moment of gratitude was when I was in the shower and I was thinking of all the virtues. And I credit my friend Jamie Lamorges for planting this thought in my head a number of years ago. But I was standing in my shower in all the warmth, waking up and thinking, God, it's so nice to have hot water, right?
Right.
Something that we take for granted all the time. There's people around the world and even in this country that don't have hot running water. So I was just basking in that warmth and thinking, you know, how lucky I am to live in this country and have the simple resource that we take for granted all the time. But it was, you know, it's one of the virtues of living in modern civilization, a hot shower. So it was like shower church.
There you go. Yeah, and nothing's like a hot shower to relax and get ready for your day.
Yep. So I'm going to choose to spend my Sunday thinking about gratitude and all the things that we have to be grateful for. And I'm grateful for this podcast because I'll tell you what, I was thinking about it yesterday that how lucky are we in this time? It would be a lot more difficult if I didn't have the ability each week to spend time with you and another person, another artist, and talk about one of the things that we both really love, and that's art.
Yeah. Well, and it does. It allows you to kind of separate yourself from the 24-hour newscast and take a moment. And we're grateful for all our listeners. I'm grateful for the time I spend with you, obviously, and with our wonderful guests. So I appreciate it.
Well, Wes, this week is no exception in that we have another incredible artist that's joining us. For this episode on the podcast, we have Cody Kuehl. Cody is an illustrator, painter, and mixed media artist here in Denver, Colorado. His website is artofcodykuehl.com, and it's ARTOFCODYKUEHL.com. Cody, welcome to the program.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Great.
Good, man.
It's good to have you.
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited.
Right out the gate here, I want to talk about your work, your art. Tell our listeners that may not be familiar with it, what kind of work that you do. I mentioned kind of basically the different mediums or what have you, but specifically kind of in your own words, tell us what you do.
I had like this throwaway line where I was going to talk about how I smear paint on a canvas with the thing that I call a brush, but I don't, that's too much of a gag. No, I'm a painter, illustrator, like you said. I think my work, if you were to categorize it, it would be like moment of impact images of the West in a lot of ways. That's probably what I'm best known for. I have a lot of other stuff that I've done over the years that just hasn't quite caught on as well. But it's very graphic design, very illustration based. Most of my work starts off as illustration, and then I translate it into a painting medium. And then I've done different layered stuff to kind of add different elements to it. So, yeah.
So it starts off as a digital illustration, so it's multi-stepped.
I'm a big believer in journaling. I have my drawing journals that I keep every year. So I have journals for the last 10 years of my drawing, and I use the hardback black journals, and I fill those up as I go through my year. And every year I actually use that as it's kind of a centering device. Like this year the title is Improvise, Adapt, Overcome. And then I do all my little pencil drawings in there. Nice. And then sometimes I'll pop it right up onto the canvas, and sometimes I'll take it in digitally. Sometimes I'll edit it digitally. You have a good idea on pencil, and then you go in and edit it in Procreate before you do anything on canvas. So I'm kind of all over the place with that.
How do you decide which direction you're going to go with that? Like what dictates what?
It depends on the drawing. If the drawing sucks, but it's a good idea, it might need a little digital work. Some of the recent stuff I've had has been just really knockout ideas, but the execution isn't there. And then some of my pencil ideas I've really loved. I can just see the painting in it, and then I don't feel like I need to develop it. Sometimes I get up in my own head a little too much about it, and I start thinking like, oh, I need to develop this digitally before I throw it up on canvas, when I don't really need to. So, that's part of the artist struggle, is always managing your workflow, how much you need to do and how much you can trust yourself to just do it,
Gotcha. So it depends on the day, whether or not you're overthinking it or if you're just kind of going with the flow.
Totally. Yeah. I had this last big painting I did. I sent my friend, I was like, I'm totally painting blind right now. He's like, get the hell out of here, man. Like, it's fine. It's totally fine.
We are our own worst critiques. That's for sure. I look at my stuff, totally. My photography, and go, good God, I should quit.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely have those days. The best thing you can do is work on it and then set it aside for a while. And then you sometimes come back and you're like, that's okay. It's fine.
It's hard when you're so close to your work sometimes. Sometimes it's hard to look at it with fresh eyes and in an outside perspective, right?
Yeah. You need to get a lot of different looks, and that's part of what is important to me, is creating all the time. I'm always trying to keep a sketchbook. I'm always trying to keep drawing. I'm always doing different artistic projects because it keeps things fresh and it helps you kind of see things in a different way.
This is a question Todd asks a lot, is do you have multiple projects going on at the same time? It sounds like you do.
Yeah, it's too many right now. We have, I actually pivoted to more of a gallery approach this year because of festivals being on hold. And a lot of that means they need more work. So I need more work out than just sitting in a tent, more work than could fit in a 10 by 10 tent. So creating a lot more is big, and then doing a new series. I'm doing a new series we can talk about, and I'm in a band, so we got to record drums, and then we just recorded a music video with a skeleton crew and masks and outdoors and everything. So we got to edit that down. So probably, it's but all that stuff gives you a different look. It gives you a different visual approach. It gives you a different eye for things. You see colors in a different way. After we finished that video shoot, I had this idea for a painting I was like, these are the colors we're going to use, because I was up at 6 a.m. and watched the sunrise, and I was like, well, that's going on a painting. So,
hey, yeah, that's awesome.
So having those irons in the fire has really helped, over the years. Just that, I've never been what I would call like a specialist in any of my mediums. Yeah, having that diverse approach has really helped coming up with new ideas, and then also just being able to set things aside and, if you're in the weeds with it.
Yeah.
So your approach really is, no matter what, you're just going to work through it. Even if you kind of get not writer's block, but kind of an artist block, you're just going to keep working. And at some point you'll figure it out what direction it's going.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. There comes a point when I'm doing like my plexiglass stuff that it's got to be put on right, because it's reverse painted. So you have to have the execution right in your mind when you get to that point. But everything up to then is if it's not working, I'll set it aside. If something is working, then I'll churn on that. I grew up on a farm. My first job, I remember in town, they were like, you got to take 15 minutes off every couple hours. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? My dad did not let that happen. He would go unload manure, and it was like, you went for 8 hours, and getting lunch meant going in and getting a sandwich and eating it on your way back out, kind of thing. So that's kind of my...
I was just going to say, so my farming experience, I grew up in eastern South Dakota and helped a lot of family friends on their farm. And, so there's breakfast, there's lunch, there's dinner, there's supper.
Uh-huh.
Because you work your tail off, that's your breaks. And they brought the food to you in the field. They just brought out the food and you ate on site, but that was your break, is eat a sandwich and then get back to work. Yeah. So that's funny.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's totally kind of where my approach is. You know, I'm always trying to get out of this mindset because I have kids now, and Hannah and I have kids, and trying to get out of that work all the time mindset. And actually the pandemic has helped with that in a lot of ways, because I can't go to festivals, and it's helped to clarify as an artist where my time is best spent. And that's not necessarily driving 8 hours to Albuquerque for a show, or, you know, sitting in a tent for 3 days. So it's clarified some artistic decisions for me that are like, okay, you can churn on this, but what's the best thing to churn on? And I've kind of landed on creating art is the thing I need to be doing the most. And that should be a duh moment, but I'm kind of dumb. So it took me a while to get there.
Well, I think that's interesting that, you know, you were, well, I don't think you're dumb, first of all. The fact that I can tell that you're a thinker. I can see it in your art, and obviously the business side of things, which we'll get to later on in the podcast. But, you know, you strike me as a thinking man, and it makes sense that during this downtime, when you didn't have festivals and other things that you may be doing in a regular year, that it would cause you to stop, take stock, and kind of reassess where you're at, you know, both in your career, with your family, you know, and then the creative process as well. So, you know, it's very pertinent. I think a lot of artists are probably in the same boat this year as far as reassessing where they're at and where they're going. And, you know, 2021 is no different. Like 2020 was the year to reassess. 2021 for sure is, you know, take what you've learned from 2020 and put it to practice and streamline it even more, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of artists, I was talking to a crew from RIMCAD, Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design, and they said, well, what are you doing with all this downtime? And I was like, you're crazy if you're not making art. You're crazy. You know, if you're not making stuff right now, if you have the extra time, you're wasting it right now. And creating content is absolutely, it's the first priority that any artist should have, because that's your goal. That's, you know, the golden goose right there. So yeah.
Back in July of last year, when we were really pivoted towards doing Zoom, you know, Todd and I talked about that. And my assumption is, what do you do when the pandemic hits and you can't go anywhere? Well, you produce and produce and produce. But I know there's probably some artists, and we haven't really ran into this, but I'm sure there's some artists that were completely paralyzed by, you know, this uncertainty. But man, a lot of the people we've talked to, they were able to pivot and change their whole, and we'll talk about this later, but their whole business model.
Yeah.
But first thing that came to my mind is, if you're locked up and you're quarantined, not locked up, but if you're quarantined in your home or you're in your studio, man, you got to be painting, you know, and then what does it look like, you know, when you're done? Is like, oh, my whole vision shifted. And I don't know if that's the case, but those were my assumptions.
Yeah, I think it's important. You know, there was all these memes that online that, you know, you don't have to do anything during a pandemic. And I was like, it sure helps though. Helps my sanity personally. For me, I need to create something or I'm going to go crazy. So yeah.
And that also goes back to your upbringing, right? Because a strong work ethic is part of the fabric of who you are as a person. Growing up on a farm, that's hard work. And that really probably plays into how you approach everything in life, I imagine.
Yeah. We grew up raising and breeding and training draft horses, Belgian draft horses, which are like the Budweiser Clydesdales. And that's, you know, a big part of why I'm probably the Western orientation of my artwork. So that meant 40 acres of hay. That's 2,000 bales a year that we threw into a barn that's 20 feet high. We were throwing 3 layers of hay. You know, these hay stacks were, you know, 20 bales high, just insane long days. And my dad had this crazy work ethic too, that just rubbed off, and now I just can't stop.
And you grew up in Northern Colorado, right?
Yeah. Longmont, Loveland. Well, Loveland first, and then we moved to Longmont. And then actually Hannah and I were down in Denver until 2 years ago, and we found a house, a little farmhouse, 2 doors down from my parents out in the country. So
Oh,
that
wow.
we live down there. We're trying to get some horses back together, some horses that we raised.
Right on, man. That's
Yeah,
what a
it's
cool
been fun.
experience to grow up in that environment. I know that it was a lot
Yeah.
of work, and you probably didn't realize it necessarily at the time, and maybe you did, but I'm sure as an adult you appreciate, where you came from in that environment, obviously, because you moved back into the same area.
Yeah. We moved right next door. So yeah, it was an irreplaceable experience in my youth. We drove a hitch of 6 horses in all around the country, and showed horses for years and years, and had friendships that we made, and that still to this day are strong and some of the most important factors in my life, I would say.
Yeah, when you were talking about throwing bales, I just had a flashback of my youth as a teenager, and so on the Heineke farm, we'd pick rock, and that was fun because they planted crops, and then on the Mackner ranch, they had cattle and horses, and we had some quarter horses and stuff, but we'd go out and throw bales, and Guy Mackner is 6'8" high, and he can throw bales pretty damn far.
Yeah.
So me and a couple other teenagers would be on there stacking bales while my dad and Guy Mackner were throwing bales. It was, so it's just like, oh, I just had a little flashback. It was cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can relate.
A lot of that, a whole lot of that. We had a hay barn, like I said, that's about 20 feet tall. And we would, from the trailer, we'd make like a platform that was about 5 feet off the air. And then somebody from the trailer would throw it onto there. And then that person would throw it up to the next level. And then I was usually on the top there throwing it onto the top level. So we were about, 13 bales high, and then you throw 100-degree days in there. The top of the barn is, 115. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah. But that's, it's all rubbed off. That's why I can stay up. When I started as an artist, I was working 8-hour days, and then worked 8-hour days right after that on art, because I had my normal job, and, that's kind of what it took for me, is to have my normal job, but then also work that extra mile to get the art business where I wanted it to.
Yeah.
So in your artist statement on your website, you talk about the myth and ethos of the West, and you talk about the contrast of the narrative, the duality of the narrative, and you talk about how this work is essentially kind of a dialogue with the history of the American West. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a real interesting part of what I've been trying to do with these pieces is, like, on the face of them, they're like the badassest Western guys in the world kind of thing. It's like the ultimate badass country gunslinger, but like behind it, and that's like all the movies and TV shows and pop culture of the West is kind of like that. But underneath that veneer, of that polished veneer, is this like other side of that Western genre that's not as cool, that's not as nice, that, I talk to people that are like, oh, I wish I lived back then. I'm like, they don't. It suck in a lot of ways, like there's something about the frontier that was really, really hard, really, really brutal. There's chapters of American history that are really, really dark, so I've played with some of those themes, but there's this duality there that, behind this person who is bred to kill is like very dark. That's a pretty dark way to live, like fighting over a card game is kind of like not very civilized, so in a lot of ways, our American experiences, it's twinged with the glory of the West that was really, in a lot of ways, it's gorgeous and it's beautiful and it's romantic, but it's also really dangerous and dark and scary in a lot of ways. So there's the myth of the West, the ethos of the West. You have these great soaring tales, but under that, a lot of times exists this other layer of, shit, like
right.
Really, really hard stuff. And that's something I think we can have a dialogue about. I think it's something that we as artists and individuals can talk about. There's one of the early paintings that was really like a proof of concept for this series when I first started doing the Western stuff, was this one called After the Church Bell Rings. And it's a painting of a guy walking away from something. He's in the frame and he's walking away from the frame. And there's some people standing around looking at each other crosswise. And there's some people that are just standing there kind of stunned. And that was one of the first ones that I was like, if I could do this every time, I could make a living at this. Because what I did was I did a naming contest for it. And I've told this story before, but the naming contest was interesting because it was everything from shit just went down, he just murdered 20 people, to like Yellow Belly was one of the titles that stuck out to me. And he has this physicality in the painting of being hunched over and looking either defeated or victorious, but like tired, kind of physicality. And I wanted to pick the most ambiguous title for that because I wanted people to tell their own story to it. And I want people to draw their own tale from it, because the West is kind of like, it's almost like a meme in a way. Like memes are really good online at picking people's stories. People can relate to it immediately. They know the character, they know the thing, they know the type of meme, and then they can extract a joke from it. But like the West isn't a meme as a joke as much as it is people know the stories, they know the characters, they know the place and the time and the settings, they know the tropes, they know the stories, so they can look at those images and they can interpret it really immediately. And that's what I like about working in that Western genre, is because the more ambiguous I get, the more people tell their own story to it. That's what's really been really fun about it, is having these pictures that people can, pick their own details out and try and tell their own story too. And that allows me to not be so heavy-handed with any like political message or, it allows a dialogue instead of just, there's some contemporary art. I think Banksy is one that is like, oh, that's what it means. You see a Banksy and you're like, it means that. And there's some interesting play with that, some dialogue there. But I'm not trying to compare myself to Banksy by any means. He's more successful than me by far. But, I'd like to leave it ambiguous to be able to tell this kind of American tale. So that's that duality there that people can play with.
And this is exactly why I love your work, man.
Thank you.
Every single thing that I see of yours, every single piece, you could take it at face value, but if you stand there and spend a little bit of time with it, immediately the narrative comes into play. I think that would be said with anybody that views these, that has any, whether they have a connection to the West or not, because like you said, there's the myth and the legend about what it is, but you definitely get sucked into the story. There's a story in every single one of these pieces. And not only are they telling a story, but they're beautiful. And it really does. It resonates with me because I love the story. I love it when you can look at something and it can have multiple, like you said, meanings to a diverse group of people. And I love the fact that you're delving into, this whole thing about being an American, the independence of America, the Wild West. But also, we have this reputation, God, we're showing it now, right? Where we're a bit lawless, anything could go down. It is kind of the Wild West at the moment, or we're revisiting it in modern times in some ways, and coming to grips with that without being, beating somebody over the head with that idea. You just let the story unfold, but coming to grips with that dark part of our history. If you think about it, it's really based on a lot of violence and doing some pretty nefarious things to a lot of different groups of people, Yeah,
it's kind of this anti-hero culture that we love so much as Americans is really, really intriguing. Even some of the biggest heroes of the West, like you think of like the movie Tombstone, Doc Holliday in that movie is not like a good guy. He's kind of a bad guy, but he's a hero in the movie. And you would even see that in history. Like in the Western history, it's really intriguing to see how many times you'd have these rogues find a new life as a sheriff because they could pull a gun, in American history, so anything, it's one of the really intriguing parts of this genre is anything that anybody says never happened, or anybody that's like, wow, that didn't happen very often. It always happened the one time. It always happened the one time. And one of my favorite art related stories with this in the West is Wild Bill Hickok censored a painting in Phil Coe's saloon. And he held this artist at gunpoint to change this painting that this artist had done of a bull with unusually large testicles. And I just love that.
That's awesome.
Wild Bill held somebody at gunpoint to change a painting for the size of this bull's balls. Just cracks me up.
Oh my
And,
God.
you know, like, so the stories of the West are so varied, and there's, you know, so much, there's so much to play with. I had one painting that I did that was, I swear no pun intended, but that's the only word I can think of it, as inflammatory, of a woman in front of some covered wagons that were on fire. And I intentionally left it. I mean, it sounds pretty straightforward, right? It sounds like somebody burned the wagons down and she's holding a gun in front of the wagons. We all know who burned down the wagons, right? But you look into history, and Native Americans didn't have any monopoly on burning down wagons. Right. There was a lot of people that burned down wagons. And I've had a few people reach out to me and say, well, this is a really bad stereotype. And I was like, there's only the woman there. There's no arrows in there. Why did you jump to, you know, Native Americans burning down the wagons? And that one was probably as far as I want to push it. That's
right. Right.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, you know, even if, so the stereotypes, there's some of them are, and this is going to sound horrible, and I shouldn't even say this, but are bound in truth. And, you know, coming from South Dakota, there's a monument near Bear Butte of a family that was two brothers, and one of the brothers had a wife that was murdered by, they believe, Native Americans from Red Cloud's tribe, even though that's been contested as well. But and they were murdered, and there's a roadside sign for that. And then the Metz family down by Edgemont, there was an outlaw that ran around with a number of Native American people, and he could have murdered them for the money because they were going back to Cheyenne, and it was the Metz family. And there's a little sign about the massacre there, killed husband, wife, an African American woman who was their cook, and then a mule skinner, you know, one who drove mules, you know. And so it's part of our history. The fact that the wagons were burning is part of our history. Now, you can make conclusions to either one, but, you know, it's a narrative story about, you know, it may be a fictional story, but it's bound in historical evidence that these things did happen, you know.
And the really interesting thing is, if I do paintings of Native Americans, they're more often criticized for looking too savage. But I can paint a white guy holding a gun, and I've never had anybody call me out for having a white guy look savage. Right. When he's shooting somebody down over a card game.
Right.
Like, that's a pretty stark divide when you're talking like cultural divides in art history. And not just art history, in American history. And that's an interesting dichotomy that I've been struggling with more lately. It is viewed in this super positive way. And I'm getting to the point where I'm like, man, I don't know if it's the lockdown, but I'm kind of getting to the point where I want to paint some more peaceful stuff too.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's a whole romance to this, and like you nailed it on the head. So there's a character you painted that reminds me of the opening scene of Wild Wild West. Do you remember that TV show? You're too young to have watched it.
Yeah, I've heard about it a few times.
You should go, if nothing else, go Google Wild Wild West intro. And the illustrator is Ken Mundy, and he did a lot of illustrations for Hollywood back then. But he does an illustrated beginning of the Wild Wild West series that is, when I saw your stuff, I'm like, oh my God, that looks so much. And I wasn't even claiming that you were copying that, but it just that instant, once again, that instant reminder of, a great show that I loved as a kid, and I always love the intro. Here's he gives this dude a karate chop. He's backing out of obviously just robbing a saloon, and he turns and he does a karate chop in the back of this guy's head. And then this woman, he kisses this woman. This is very misogynistic, but he kisses this woman and she breaks out this knife and is going to stab him in the back, and he punches her in her face. And I was just like, I love that show. But, Robert Conrad was just an amazing character for me as a kid, but so when I seen your stuff, I was like, oh my God, this is so awesome. But yeah, you'll have to check that out.
Thank you. Yeah. Actually, Mandalorian. Have you watched Mandalorian at all?
Oh, I've not. I've heard great things about. My boss is a huge fan. Yeah.
It's like a modern space Western, Star Wars is a space Western too, pretty much to me. Yeah. But they're doing some of that same stuff at the end. They're doing some of the scenes from the movie. They have the stills. They have drawings of the scenes that are kind of the same way. It's these high impact, illustrated scenes of that. So yeah, that stuff it's powerful. It really kicks. Yeah.
But Todd is right on, is when you look at especially the Western stuff, there's a story there. And if you just sit with it for a while and just let the story emerge, it's pretty fun. It's a lot of fun. I like it.
Yeah. It's a tremendously interesting thing to dig into for storytelling purposes. And it's intriguing, just that dichotomy of the pop culture approach to it, how it's so Eurocentric. And I think I've probably fallen into that trap too. I've probably taken that, my work is kind of this hyper stereotype of the West. And I'd like to think that people are seeing it as something that's challenging some of those stereotypes, that you hold that up as a mirror. And I would like to think that people would see that reflection and say, that's not all how it was.
Let me say this, Cody. And I think it's interesting about the story you told about the burning wagons and stuff. So there's multiple narratives, like you alluded to before, as far as what could be going on in that thing. But if you think about it, like you said, that it could be Native Americans burning those wagons, but it could have been outlaws too, because it was such a lawless place and time. But the other side of the conversation is this, and this is where my brain goes, like, colonialism is all based on violence. It's Europeans coming into a new land and then, basically conquering a people and making them subservient. And it's through violent means that this happens, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if you're a Native American and you've seen what these white people, can do and have done to your family, your friends, your part of your tribe, you're not going to take it. You're not going to let people come in and kill your children. That's just not going to happen, right? Maybe you don't want to be that way, but if, I can say as a parent, there's no way that I'm going to let somebody hurt my children. I would die for my children. And so, retaliation is part of that. Like, if you act like a jerk, or, you're going to be violent, violence begets violence. It's kind of part of our nature as human beings.
Yeah. There's this romanticized idea of what the West was, and cowboys and Indians and stuff like that. Most often it was Native Americans fighting the American military, or the American military killing off buffalo as a weaponized way to drive Native Americans to reservations and to starve people out. It's this whole cycle of violence that exists in America's history that we've romanticized and tried to gloss over. And it's sexy. I'll give it that. But I'd like to think that, some of the things that I do, like I said, hold that mirror up to that image and say, okay, this is the sexy version, but it's also pretty brutal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So these narratives that you come up with, I imagine it's taken a while to really kind of distill that down and how to get to that point or tell these stories. But Have you always been a storyteller? Because that's what I see you as. You're a storyteller. You're just using painting and illustration and these other mixed medias to convey the story. Have you always had some kind of narrative always running in your head, even as a kid?
Yeah, I've actually started. I've always drawn. I've always done little illustrations. When I started doing these Western ones, especially, I had just finished writing a sci-fi 30-page comic for Comic-Con. I did Comic-Con, Denver Comic-Con, the year one, and you have to say Denver Pop Culture Con now. And hopefully they come back in 2022. They're shut down for this year again. So I did a sci-fi comic, and then actually started doing stills for these Western ones as a Western comic book that I was working on with a friend. And we had a whole story mapped out, and I started painting these. And then they started selling, the paintings started selling, and I wasn't finishing the comic. So I was like, well, I'll just keep painting. so the initial versions of these came from illustrations that I was doing for like a whole story. And then actually, as I've worked, I've found myself connecting some of these pieces. There's a piece that I finished, This Could Be the Hill We All Die On, which is kind of a convoluted name. I'll give it that. But that's that has a forest fire. It's this standoff between these four guys, and it's this forest fire is behind them. So it's, there's some immediacy to getting the standoff taken care of. But then the next piece that I finished has this like orange sunburst over the background, over the hills. And I started thinking, I'm like, they're just in the horizon, like the forest fire is in the background of this other one. And so I found myself subconsciously kind of connecting these stories in my mind as well. And it's just so fun to kind of imagine it all as its own universe almost.
I love that. I would love to read the comic book. So if you ever finish it,
yeah, thank you. Yeah. And, there's like, as much as I critique, like we've talked about all the perils of the West, it is this great storytelling vehicle, that has, just very immediate moment of impact kind of events that are just so unpredictable at times and just really interesting to play with.
It is the kind of quintessential American narrative, right? Like if you talk to people from other countries, they have like this idea in their head, maybe not quite so much in this modern age, but previous for sure, people thought that it was all, a bunch of what they imagined they saw at the movies, right? At the theater that weekend with these cowboy movies.
Yeah. And it's kind of this universal, I almost think it's universal in a lot of ways. If you've ever watched Seven Samurai, that's an old black and white film, Japanese film. Yeah, Kurosawa. Yeah, yep. I was trying to think of the director, and they made it into Magnificent Seven, and it's a shot-for-shot remake, and they're both perfect. Like they're both amazing. Magnificent Seven is a little Eurocentric, that they're coming to save the Mexican villagers, but other than that, I think the character structure stands up, in just these perfect, almost near universal tropes of different heroes and anti-heroes and the frontier and, identity of who we are, and that we want to be heroes, we all want to be heroic and we want to tell that story about ourselves and about our culture. And I think that's kind of where that comes from is, in the end, we're all going to end up telling our story like, yeah, we were the hero the whole time.
Right.
And sometimes we're wrong.
Yeah, we did a comparative study in that in college. I did a film class, and we did a comparative study between the Seven Samurai and the Magnificent Seven. And there's a whole sling of them. Kurosawa did a couple other ones, and then there's other artists that do the same thing. So it's
really,
the Potemkin. There's a scene from the Potemkin. The Odessa step scenes is is the basis for the subway or the subway station in The Untouchables with the baby carriage. If you look at the scene shot to shot, it's the exact same scene. that they
Really?
did. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
there's these nods, but yeah, so it's fun. And who thought would be like a samurai story, be an homage to the Old West, but it is kind of, set that way. I don't know if I can't remember if Kurosawa really had that in mind when he made it, but when they did the spaghetti westerns, it's definitely a nod to the American Old West, So yeah, that's cool that you said that.
Well,
yeah.
and I think that where I'm going with the Seven Samurai is that it's almost that same wanting to have these heroes and these anti-heroes, and the way we tell ourselves the story after the fact. It's definitely, I think Seven Samurai is just outstanding on its own. Such a great movie.
Yeah.
So obviously movies are an influence for you. I imagine because of the way or the style of your work that, comics have played a part in all this. Is that right? Did you grow up reading comics a lot?
Yeah, actually, Bill Watterson, Calvin and Hobbes is one of my favorite artists, all-time artists. Bill Watterson was great. I did all the Marvel books, all the Image books growing up, all the superhero stuff. And then even recently, Nick Dragata drew for East of West. It's a comic book. It's like a post-apocalyptic revisionist American history comic. Apocalyptic, pre-apocalyptic, I guess. And it's Western based, it's like this gunslinger culture in the comic book. It's just outstanding. I can't recommend that one enough. It has the best finale of any comic book I've ever read. But yeah, that's definitely a huge part of my artistic approach, is seeing that kind of the stylized way that comics presents things. And I think that's what's really driven my style in a lot of ways is, if I had gone to art school, I probably wouldn't have ended up painting like this, because I've just gone on my influences, and my influences were Bill Watterson and, Mike Mignola from Hellboy, and all these different artists that have these hyper stylized, hyper black line, super contrast work. And that's probably closed some doors for me, honestly, because it's not, when Western art collectors see it, a lot of times they're like, I don't get it. I don't get it. But Bill Watterson, being one of my all-time favorite artists, is because I think he's one of the greatest illustrators of all time. But he also pushed the boundaries of his craft. If you've ever read the 10th anniversary book of his work, he fought tooth and nail to fight copyright of his work, to keep the copyright so that they wouldn't make plush dolls, they wouldn't make an animated show, they wouldn't do stickers and knickknacks and McDonald's toys. He stood in the way of making tens of millions of dollars for himself and those people around him, because he wanted to keep the sanctity of his character. He wanted that character to live in children's minds instead of in a plush doll. And that, as like an early, when I knew that about him in high school, just that drove home the amount of integrity this person had for their work, and for just doing what he knew was right for himself. I don't want to sound too high and mighty, but the only reason I've ever done art is to do what I wanted to do. And if it sold, then great. And if it didn't, then, go and get a day job. And, having those kind of role models in art for me really helped me kind of stay in the game, to know there's people with that kind of integrity. And I'm not saying everybody has to have that type of integrity or that kind of ethos for their art, but that just works for me. It's like, I want to paint the things I want to paint, how I want to paint them. And if people don't like it, then, I'm cool with that. So
you brought up a really important point as far as being staying true to yourself and staying true to your voice. I think it's easy to be led astray. And I'm glad you didn't go and get a formal art education, because I feel like, as much as you can learn, and in some ways it would have been beneficial, of course, obviously that hasn't hindered you in any way, shape, or form, but also there's a certain way that they teach you in art school. And if you don't fall in, and we've heard this from other artists, if you don't fall into the particular curriculum's philosophy of what's supposed to happen or that particular instructor, they can sometimes quash that in an artist. And so I think, man, I just admire how you've done it, for one, but also I see this integrity that you're talking about in your own work. And I love Bill Watterson, by the way. It really resonated with me the first time that I first saw that comic strip. And I was like, this guy is genius. Like, he's saying so much with his comic. And I love the fact that, and I never put two and two together. I didn't realize that he retained all his copyright and he never licensed it for, making toys or what have you. And, watering down his legacy as far as being a storyteller, right?
Yeah. Well, he even went as far as to change the Sunday strip, because he believed in the integrity of the old comics. Like if you go back, 75, 100 years, you'd have whole page comics in the newspapers. It wouldn't just be a strip. It'd be like a whole newspaper page. So he fought the publishers of these big papers too, even to say, I want to do this strip this way. And I don't want to have a throwaway panel that you can just cut out. I want to have this much space. And he got crap from other artists. He got crap from the newspapers, but he always made better art. He always wanted to push the boundaries of his art form. And he always wanted to find new ways to do things, and that's translated into, kind of my mantra is always make art, but always make better art, or try to make better art. I don't always make better art. It's sometimes worse. But pushing that craft and trying to know enough about what's come before to see where to take it next. And I think, I've learned things the hard way that I didn't get in art school. I was told in high school that I'd get laughed at art college. I did these stinky little cartoon sketches, they're like little comic sketches. It was like a lady pushing a little devil baby in her baby carriage. And my teacher literally told me I'd get laughed at art school. And I was like, well, I guess I don't want to go to art school then. That's fine. I guess I just won't go then. Problem solved.
There you go.
So that could have killed you, or it could inspire you like it did. So that's interesting. Some people, that would have been the end. That they would have been devastated to hear that, right? You're like, yeah, whatever. Big deal. I don't need to go to art school. I'm going to do my own thing. But it took you a while to get there. And I want to get a little bit of your backstory. I want you to tell, what is the catalyst? Was that a catalyst right there? That was probably a moment right there when that teacher told you that. But it wasn't till later that you decided to follow this path. Is that correct?
It's been a weird journey for sure. Like I never saw art as like a career per se. My brother and I always drew all the time. My brother Brady is my best friend. So we drew growing up, and he always inspired me because he's a great illustrator too. And yeah, high school, I always did art classes, art or college. I went to school to be a teacher. And then in college and out of college, I started seeing, I started dabbling in art. And I think one of the most formative experiences for me was I was doing art and I really wanted to just jump to something new because I was at a job that had it had gone to its natural conclusion. So at 27, I bailed and said, oh, I'm going to be a full-time artist with zero reason to think I could do that. I had some paintings that I had done and no history of art sales. And then it was 2008, September of 2008, when I quit, which is a terrible time on top of a terrible idea.
Well, the economy crashed because
Right,
of the
recession.
housing bubble. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember I put in my letter of resignation, and then Freddie Mac got federalized. They took that in and bought those up, and I was like, I feel like this is a bad sign for the art economy. But what do I know? But one of the lucky things that happened to me was I found a spot. Darren from Summit Studios in Fort Collins. Well, he's not in Fort Collins anymore, but he had a place called Gallery Underground in Fort Collins. And that place was just, rent space, make it, take it. And it was the underground, hip, college, young, vibrant art gallery in town at the time. And that place was just like a boiler room of artists and, competitiveness, but also collaboration and also discussion and conversation about art and how to do art. And, I started seeing that I could sell some, but I started seeing different ways to create, and being part of that art community was just huge for me as like a formative art experience, just gave me so much confidence to get out and talk to people about my art and to discuss art, to see what's working and to see what's not working. And I think any young artist, if I could encourage them in any significant way, would be put your art up somewhere and stand in front of it and talk to people about it. The art needs to be up, but you need to see what people are thinking about it. And so to have that dialogue with people, there's one thing to have a dialogue with people with your art, they see it and they have this, that's the dialogue. It's another thing to have a real dialogue with people about it, to talk to people the way that we're talking, about art and how they're connecting with it. And then after Gallery Underground, that actually got shut down by the fire department, which has been a recurring theme in my life. It's galleries being shut down by the fire department. It's happened almost 3 times now.
Wow.
Yeah. Then Hannah and I moved down to Denver, and I found Boxcar Gallery, which I think just actually closed. And that was kind of that next group of artists down in Denver that I just rented a studio space in Boxcar and would show on First Fridays when we could do those large gatherings in the olden days.
In the olden days, I love that.
In the olden days, before 2020, the decade of 2020. Feels like forever.
I know.
Yeah. So yeah, Boxcar was great. That was another art family, and that's one of the things I've been really blessed with is great art families. I took over Boxcar for a little while, and we rebranded it as Red Wolf, and it was kind of the same. I just wanted to do Gallery Underground again, the redo. I just copied the model from Darren, and essentially just said, you can rent space, and it's a place to try your new ideas and up and coming artists. I want you to have a place to show your work. And it was crazy. It was just, you saw all these different artists of all these different stripes, and we've actually spun that out into because when Red Wolf closed, we decided to it was too much work and we weren't getting what we wanted out of it at some point. We just said, hey, what if we had Red Wolf as like a idea instead of a place? What if we had Red Wolf as like a family, as a network? We've since done shows as the Red Wolf group, and that's, whatever coalition of the family, anybody that's ever really shown with Red Wolf, or anybody that I'm like, hey, do you want to come and show with us? It's just this like banner head to show work under. And it's been a great new art family that continues to grow and change and thrive. So it's been a weird journey. It's been really strange.
I want to refer to something that's kind of business related, but we'll get to more business stuff later. But while I'm still thinking of it, there was a place that you rented a space, but you actually rented just wall space and not. But
no, I know what
you
you're
know which
saying.
one
Yeah.
I'm talking about?
Yeah, that was Red Wolf.
And
we did the same thing at Gallery Underground, and there's this slur for that, and it's a vanity gallery, and people say, oh, it's a vanity gallery. They had to pay to show their work. No gallery was going to show my work when I was 25. Nobody knew who I was. Like, and I think the classic model is you go to art school and you have a network of artists and they connect you with a gallery, and then you just get representation and then sales, And I think for most artists, that's not a reality that they live in. There's not necessarily a culture of artists that are helping other artists up. And artists that are connecting artists with galleries, it's kind of a free-for-all, because let's face it, there's more artists than there is money right now, or probably in any economy. There's more artists trying to get the money that would be spent on art.
Yeah.
And so that idea of like a vanity gallery, for me, I don't have a problem renting space, because I feel like I'm going to go there, I'm going to promote it, I'm going to make money, I'm going to sell art,
The way I took it too, there's a little bit of a switch there. It's a gallery showing your stuff, and at one time, now it's not an actual building, but it's a space of online space. I'm taking it, right? The new Red Wolf, is it on, or is there a physical space?
So it's been a few different iterations. We had a space where we could rent wall space, and then we had a group that met, just like it was like the Red Wolf support group kind of thing, where we would talk about our thoughts and dreams and fears, and we would also network about business and talk about like, here's some opportunities, here's some new galleries, and we would talk about how we can connect with other galleries. And then it turned into a network where we did events, like we did the 420 Fest. Totally bad idea. One year, it was the year that it was such a shit show in Denver at Civic Center Park, and oh my god, it was terrible. So many really wasted people. But we would do events like that together. We would pool resources, get tents together, do it as a family, and help artists come and sell and bring new people into the fold. And then the next iteration was permanent gallery space, where it was at Booze Hall in the Rhino Arts District, and we had a temporary space there, finished our permanent space, and then the week that we finished our permanent space, the fire department said we needed a fire suppression system in the building that we were subletting from. So after finishing like 1,000 square feet of drywall, we shut it down.
Man.
Walked away from it.
That sucks. So one point I wanted to bring out of that, from what I was reading, is like you were saying, you can have your art in a gallery if you can get in, and you pay and then the gallery gets a cut, their cut. Where you were saying in this, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were renting wall space and you were paying for that wall space, and then the commission was yours to keep.
Yeah.
You just rented space and the profit was purely yours. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We had essentially, I wanted a place to show every month, and I wanted a place that had dynamic art and fun art. And then I just use it as a pass through, the rent as a pass through, essentially to just pay the rent for the gallery, so that I had a place to show, I had artists to show with, and I wasn't making any money off the rental. Essentially, I was just there to make money off my art. You get criticized for that sometimes, because people are like, oh, it's just this, you're paying to show your art and you shouldn't have to do that. And it's like, yeah, you shouldn't have to do that. But, tell me what business doesn't pay for advertising. What other business you wouldn't pay for like prime real estate? What other business you wouldn't pay for normal business things, in the art world? There's a lot of ways to cut that gallery side.
Well, I just think it's genius that you were thinking outside the box. Like, you weren't letting you don't strike me as a man that is going to allow somebody to dictate who you are as a person, that you're not going to be told that you can't do something. In fact, it seems to me like maybe that inspires you or lights that fire under your ass to go, well, you might say that can't be done, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to figure out a way to do it. I think it's genius. Like, who's to say what's right and what's wrong, right? Like, there's no rules. Art has no rules. So, you figured out a way to do it, and good for you.
Hey, thank you. Yeah. Like I said, I want to get my art out there. I want to make money doing it. I don't have this notion of like fame or, I want to make a living. It's that kind of hard work, make money, put the work in. And people get tied up in how they should be in the art world, how they approach galleries and how they approach showing, and they get so in their own head about, is this the way an artist should be, that they lose sight of like, am I creating the work I want? Am I showing my work? Am I selling my work? I knew I couldn't get into some of the more elite galleries in town when I started my career, but I also wanted to sell some work, and I also wanted to get some art out there, and I wanted to show it to people. So yeah, I rented a studio space, and there's this weird fine line where it's like, you shouldn't pay to show your work, but it's totally cool if you rent a studio space that you work in and also show from there. Okay. All right. So I can rent a studio space. I can rent a workspace that I can show from, but not just a show space, so it's just, people are really typecasting themselves, and they're really kind of letting it pigeonhole them, their own career, instead of like, I just want to go out and get it. If I can't get in the place I want, I'm going to make the place I want, or I'm going to do something different. Probably the best thing I've had luck wise is finding good people to do it with. Having the Gallery Underground to give me a space, and having the Red Wolf crew and the Boxcar crew. There's nobody that's done it by themselves. Anybody that's like, oh, I did this by myself, they're lying to you. So, yeah.
I'm glad you spoke to the idea of having a collective of artists that work together, that you're able to bounce ideas off of, and that also like inspire you and probably, help you with the critiquing of your work and like your evolution. I think that whole model is really important, and probably a lot of people do this. They do it in different ways, right? But I think a lot of artists tend to work in their own little vacuum, and I think it's really important when you have that kind of relationship with a bunch of other like-minded people. That group of people. We just talked to a photographer. He does the same thing when he's ready to produce a book. He goes out and does the work, but then he has a group of people that help him in the process of putting these books together after he's done the work. And he spoke to the importance of having these people that he trusts and that he feels, inspire him and are on point. They're not just going to blow smoke at him.
Yeah. And I think it's important to have people that you are inspired by as well. There's a great, in the improv scene, I'm not like a guy who is free enough to do improv, but there's a quote that they have. It's yes anding, and it's to yes and it's to say yes and support, and to like, so they're always saying, yeah, I'll do that. If there's an improv line that somebody says, then they have to agree with it and then roll with it, right? And I think that's in a lot of ways what our community does, that I found, is it's not hypercritical, but it's doing great stuff and seeing the other person doing that great stuff and saying yes. And then, we're all creating our own different thing, and it's building this momentum as a crew and as a group, instead of trying to be, tribalistic about it or competitive about it. I mean, who are you competing with as an artist? You're
competing with yourself, right? Like,
yeah,
that's a huge hole that you can fall into if you're not careful, as far as comparing yourself to somebody else, either their work or their trajectory as an artist and how successful they are. Like, that never does you any good. But your true competition is yourself, to always be bettering yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And the whole game of being an artist is present only the best stuff ever. So to compare somebody's persona, their public persona, to your own, you're comparing their public persona, which is only the edited best stuff that they've ever produced, against all of your process and all of the things that you see in your mind and studio. And you have a bad sketch or you have a bad painting and you don't want to show it to the world, but it's there. But you see these other people and you're like, God, they're perfect. they're these paragons of artistic success, and I'm not, because I still have doubt.
And the reality of it is, everybody has doubt. And like you said, and social media helps really propagate that whole idea of the perfect life, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's put it into warp speed. That you just have, yeah, it's comparing. I mean, it's part of the reason social media is so successful is because it makes people feel anxious, and it makes people feel like they're missing out. It makes people feel like they're not as good as other people. And that's what we love to see. That's how we love to feel, apparently.
It really plays on a bunch of different facets of human nature, right?
Yeah, totally. And I fall into that too. As I've been doing art for a long time, and I still find myself doom scrolling Instagram and seeing some of these artists that I admire and just hating myself and hating them and just being like, oh, you son of a bitch. I hate you so much for being so good. Stop being so good. And you're like 20 years old. And, but I think that experience of having that family and having that network helps you fall back and say like, yeah, but it's not a competition. My only competition, like you said, Todd, is it's me. My only competition is to make better work myself and push my own boundaries and push my own limits. So, yeah.
I think a good comparison of competition where they made each other better and one up. And this was actually in the development of Cubism with Picasso and George Braque. Picasso would paint one thing and then George would paint another, and then Picasso would paint something that was better. And they kind of had this back and forth. And I think, and I don't know if it was like I think they were friends, and I might be wrong on that, but I think it was just a fun collaborative where they could just compete against each other and make it different and better.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I have one of my good friends, Rich Ingersoll. He's Grave Daisy on Instagram now. He sends me stuff that I'm just like angry at. He sends some paintings that I'm just like, damn it, dude. You're so much better than me when I was your age, and he sends these musical clips that he's like, oh, I was just noodling around on my guitar and just, this miracle popped out. I'm like, screw you, man. Get off my texts.
The hell with you and your noodling.
Yeah. But he's the perfect like artist friend in a lot of ways, because he and I will talk and we'll send our ideas and we'll send our rough crappy stuff and we'll totally yes and each other, and we can share in when we see something come totally to fruition, so it's the total opposite of like a social media platform, and to have those kind of friends that you can be vulnerable with. Oh my God, my singer in my band, I sent him some ideas for this country project that we're doing. It was like rough, dry audio. Yes. Just like the worst audio you could send anybody, like a voice recording. And somebody was like, yeah, who is this? My friend had changed his phone, and I sent somebody like the worst, dumbest, unfinished line of all time. And it was, it felt like sending somebody like a dick pic, like that embarrassing. Like, that level of embarrassment. But to have the kind of friends you can trust to send your worst, like your least finished sketch to, and have them be like, I can see where you're going with that, and I trust that they're not going to share that with anyone else.
Oh my God, that's funny.
Oh man. I'm going to ask you a couple other things that might play into the inspiration for some of your work. You seem like maybe do you read a lot? Are you do you read a lot of history books or anything like that?
Yeah, I've been starting in, because I feel like I'm between work and the kids, I haven't been getting to as many books as I'd like. So I started doing Audible actually. And I just finished The Long Ships, which is a outstanding read about Vikings, and then also Empire of the Summer Moon, which is a book about the Comanche Empire. It's like exhaustively, oh, are you kidding me? So good.
Yeah, figures Todd would have it in his right behind him, like, oh, by the way.
Such a great book, man. The Comanche are such an interesting people, the way that they operated, and God, man, anybody that's if you're looking for a good book to read, that Empire of the Summer Moon is is a fantastic book, and I highly suggest it.
Yeah, it's outstanding. And, to talk about that kind of like historical framework, the stories in that book are just unbelievable in a way that cinema and pop culture has never captured, in the way that how powerful this small tribe of Native Americans were. They had an 800-mile radius that was just, people could not go in because they were such masters of horse and bow, so history and that stuff is just such an inspiration for where I'm going art wise.
Right on. That's good to hear. Yeah, the Comanche, man, they were amazing horsemen. They ruled the plains forever. Like you said, they had such a wide range, and they would just lose the cavalry and Texas Rangers and stuff. They're the reason the Texas Rangers came into existence. And they would just, they would have these parties that came after them, trying to rein them in, and they just lead them out into the middle of the prairie. And these people had no idea just how brutal it could be. There was, if they didn't know where to find water or where the game was at, they die of, they didn't even have to fight them. They could just, wait them out in the chase part of it all. Yeah. And these people would just, these white people would just die, and these trackers would die of starvation and thirst because they didn't know where the resources are at.
Yeah.
And then they were such good fighters. The other mistake that the people that were trying to get a handle on the Comanches, they made the mistake, and it took them a while to figure this out, but they would always get off their horses and try to fight these guys. And they were such badasses. They would just slaughter a man.
Yeah. And that's where you start to see, the truth is really more amazing than fiction in a lot of ways, especially with the American West. I go on all day about that book. That's, yeah.
I know. I could too. I got excited just talking about it.
Yeah, and that's one thing that really frustrates me about Hollywood is like the Hugh Glass story is another one where they just totally blotched it. If you would just follow the real story, and it's going to be entertaining enough. They put him in the winter, and it was in the middle of summer, and he's crawling on his belly through western South Dakota trying to make it back to civilization. And it was just stupid. And man, they just always fall short. It seems like just follow the story and you'd have a great story.
Yeah. And, that's part of like with my approach when it's really playing on the tropes hard. That's part of the pop appeal of it, is it plays on these like very stereotypical things. And, it's like pop art in the finest sense. It's the story that people have seen before. It's the pop culture character that somebody repurposed. It's, I've had 100 people that really want my work to be John Wayne. They want it to be John Wayne so bad. Just like, it's John Wayne to you, man. That's fine with me.
Right.
Yeah. So
I noticed that some of them, some of your Western art, art general, you paint it looks like, is it acrylic on
yeah, it's acrylic on plexi. Yeah.
Oh, there we go. It's acrylic on plexi. They're layered, right? They're 3-dimensional almost in a sense.
Yeah.
Or?
Yep.
Can you talk about that process? And then it looks like you do some that are layered wood engraving kind of, at least it's appeared. And I've only seen your work online, so it's hard to get that. So can you just take a moment and talk about the different styles or different processes that you use?
Yeah, actually the 3-dimensionality kind of came from just having the files. I do the files on paper, but I also will render them in Procreate now. I used to use Photoshop, but Procreate on the iPad is just more efficient. And I had them in layers in Photoshop. A lot of times when I would discuss my art with people, they try and like jump around the fact that it's like graphic design or graphic novel kind of feel. They're like, oh, this is kind of like I'm like, it's kind of like a comic book, right? It's kind of like a cartoon. And they're like, yeah, I just didn't want to say that. So the fact that it has this cell shaded approach, I hit a point where I was doing those on canvas, and then I hit this point where it's like, I have these in layers already. Why don't I just make cells? Why don't I make them into animation cells? So so it is essentially like a single cell of an animation frame the old school Disney used to have machines that would have these huge cells that they would film going over one another, and they would transfer out the thing. That's how they made it look like they're moving. So it's essentially the same process as that. And what I do is I translate the black lines onto the plexiglass. And that's when, as I was talking about before, that's when you need it really clear in your mind as to when you want it, what you want the final thing to look like. So essentially it's a plywood panel that I paint the background on. And then the plexiglass, you translate the black lines onto it, and then you paint in the color. And then I use standoffs that are steel standoffs with steel spacers to give it that space in between. And it lets the piece, depending on how big the spacers are, it gives you a lot more motion, and the piece can move. And then you can also paint on the back and the front of the plexi to give it curvature. So if you have like a horse butt, you paint the color in on the back, and then you paint like a little accent line on the front of the plexiglass, and it gives that curvature to it, so it's a round butt. So that's where what I was saying is that's where you really want to know when it's going to look like. So it's very flexible up to the point where I put those black lines on the plexiglass, because all of a sudden, once you start painting on plexiglass, you're painting what you're seeing through on the other side. And then you're not seeing. So there's been a few times where I painted the most badass painting I've ever done, flipped it over, and didn't nail the contrast. I didn't get I didn't hit the colors that I wanted. I painted a Native American that looked like an Italian guy this one time because he was just the whitest person ever. So I had to take it all off. I had to, and it's those things. And then you have to think about what the color is going to look like in contrast with the background. So on the panel, usually and I've switched it up recently. Usually I'll do like a drip painting that has this kind of galactic kind of splatter paint kind of feel. You have to match your colors, of course, to that as you're painting, but every stroke has to be like the right one as you go. So there's some challenge there. You have to know that's the only part of my job that's not like entirely flexible.
Right.
I have a canvas here that, if I don't like it, I'll just keep painting on it. But it's like doing a guitar solo on a recording in one take, is essentially what that part of the process is. You create the whole song and the whole idea of what the piece can be. And then you have to nail the guitar solo in just the one take, or you have a lot more work to take it off to start over. So, yeah.
There's the wood panel ones where it's like layered, if you will, or routed out almost.
Yeah. I did one of those 2 years ago for my show for Valkyrie Gallery. And I had this horse, and it was this rider, and it was essentially a piece of hardwood panel that, used a router on it and just ground down in between the spaces that I didn't want. And that I really love the look on, because it's so organic. You can get these really ragged woody edges to it. And there's a couple places I intentionally like just barely blew through, so it just has the splinters. And I did that one, and that one was, I convinced myself it was going to be easy to do that, but in 8 by 6 feet of sculpture of that. So I did a 8 foot by 6 foot homage to Dunton's Across the Intervening Desert, the Two Men Stared in Grim Defiance is the name of that one. So it's a riff on that one. It's a recreation of that Dunton painting, and it's life size horses and people. And I gave myself not enough time before the opening at Valkyrie to do it. Yeah. Routered, jigsaw, sandpaper, paint. And then I made it modular so that the horse rear end and legs is on one piece. And then there's another piece with the guy's body and the horse's front legs. And then another piece so I could fit it in my trailer. Right. But I got to the last day, the final moment, the final countdown was upon me. Had 45 minutes until I had to pick up the kids, and 15 minutes of routering left to do, and the router dies.
Oh
Just
my
naturally.
God.
Just naturally, that's so I went and got a router, picked up kids, and they got to watch me do some final work on this piece. But yeah, those wood ones are really fun. They're a good time.
And it's just amazing to look at. Yeah, I was blown away by that. And, granted, I'm just looking out on the computer. I can't even imagine what it's like in real life. But
yeah, that one's fun. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a really fantastic piece, man. How long did it take you to hit on that multi-layered process for your work?
It took a little while. Actually, right as I was getting started with the Western stuff, I was doing that pop surreal stuff as well. And I toured a company called Pepperdines. I toured there because I was getting some prints done, and they're like, well, why don't we show you what else we can do? And I saw CNC router. I saw printing on all different sorts of substrates. I saw, different cutting, different materials than I had ever seen. And that led early on in my process, I think I was still at Boxcar then, I made these little clowns.
Oh, that's cool.
Did a little digital illustration and did these little tabletop guys. And just nailed on a little base. So that was a really early exploration into that. And then I realized I could print on plexi. So I did some digital work on layered plexiglass there and had that printed on. And then as I was working in the Western stuff, I was like, man, this is too good not to apply to this other genre too. So yeah. So it seems like they do all kinds of stuff. And as artists, it's really good to see different methods and different ways to achieve your goals. I think it's pretty easy to fall into a trap to say, oh, I just paint on canvas, and it's great. It's fine to do that. I find myself wandering hardware stores a lot, looking for little things that might be a nice accent to a piece, or looking for a way to visualize putting a piece together, or looking for a way to, imagine the utilization of different materials. I've kind of set myself on a certain trajectory that, like, okay, I got this kind of look, and I want this overall aesthetic, so that it doesn't just look like nonsense. It's like I do plexiglass and I also collaborate with car spare parts or something, like something totally out of the box. So I kind of want like a line that people can see, like a linear progression of the work, and they can see where I'm going with it too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think it's always important for like an emerging artist. If, let's say, you're a graphic designer, you need to go where the end product is made, whether it's books, go up tour a publishing house that are actually printing books, or go to a print shop or a sign shop that are doing these big signs, because you don't know what you can do at, what other end products can be. And it's a great opportunity to like see other processes. And like a big sign shop in the case is seeing how they build three-dimensional elements or, neon lighting elements to their signs. And you can, and it can just feed your creativity. So that's cool.
Totally. My friend works at, I don't know if he's working right now, because that whole industry got turned upside down. But it was like one of those really high-end production companies, print companies that would do like the Nike release for whole flagship stores, like all the branding and all the windows and all the like the wall stickers.
Mm-hmm.
And he was telling me for different influencers at a certain level, they had to manufacture an unboxing for a Kobe Bryant shoe. And it was this 25 exclusive run of 25, but it was these shoes that you would like open a latch and it would like flip the lid up, and the shoes had these hydraulics that would push the shoes out, for these influencers to put on social media. Like you said, you don't know what you can do until you see it done. And to really immerse yourself in other kind of crafts it's huge.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that evolution of your process. I think it's always interesting to see how people hit on this idea and where their brains go. It intrigues me as far as the way different people think. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
before we talk about business, I just want to talk about a couple, three particular pieces. And this is one I want to talk about because I love it. It's whimsical. It's fun, but there's definitely another narrative going on here. It's called American Lullaby.
Yeah.
I just love that piece. And it's for people that are listening, it's a buffalo playing or a bison playing a banjo, and there's a bunch of rabbits sitting around. It's got a really Western landscape at like dusk and really beautiful colors, but it's, like I said, it's fun. How did you decide to, go this route? It's a little bit different from your other graphic Western narrative. It's still part of that narrative, but it's different for sure.
Well, thank you. Funny story about this one, full disclosure, I actually have retitled this since. Because I was talking to one of my artist friends and I was like, yeah, I'm working on this American Lullaby series. And he's like, you do realize that was the name of my last triptych? I was like, damn it, no. You're telling me I totally like accidentally stole it from him, subconsciously, I think. So I've retitled this one Ramble, and it's going to be like a Ramble series because the next one is High Country Ramble. So yeah, you think you have a good idea as an artist, and a lot of times you just remixing somebody else's.
As long as you make it better.
Oh yeah, well, no, I don't think I made it better. His is outstanding. It's Michael Vacchiano's series is just great. It's so good.
Yeah.
So this one, this Ramble series, this bison is kind of like my quarantine meditation, maybe. I've had to really refocus my entire business, my entire life, because we have two small children. They weren't in school, and of course they made the school so that there was no free time. The girls had opposing schedules, so I had to really reorient myself to just sketching and making new and different stuff. And usually I go through like a sketchbook in like a year. And this year I've gone through 2. Last year I went through 2. So just a lot more sketching and a lot more new ideas. And I wanted to kind of reframe this Western genre that I've been doing. And I don't know exactly where it's going yet, but I think I have an idea. And it's kind of like a meditation. It's kind of like a little more peaceful. And I think maybe it's me getting old. Something.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. So a little more contemplative during this time of COVID. And
yeah.
The world and your age, all those factors, your family playing into that.
Yeah. And, like seeking some peace. I feel like things have been a lot more intense lately, politically and socially. And, maybe it's me seeking peace for myself in a way. So, it's a bit of a reprieve from just drawing people shooting each other all the time. And actually I'm seeing there's some throwbacks from between my works that I'm seeing from my old like pop surreal days and some of my early Western days that I'm seeing come out in sketches that are like a reflection. It's like a mirror image of older work that I've done. There's a piece that I did and it's a rabbit. It's from way back in my pop surreal days. It's actually in that portfolio. If you go to the
let me pull that up because there's some stuff I wanted to look at there as well.
Yeah. So that at the edge piece that's there, it's the rabbit holding a sword and he's like fending off this wolf, and there's another wolf behind him, and there's a forest fire behind him, and really kind of dire image. Like even if he gets through the first wolf, he's pretty screwed. And I think a lot of these are a reflection of my, I don't know, malaise, the struggle through being an emerging artist and doing the things that I want and trying to draw dynamic stuff, and the kind of intensity I felt personally, in the economic situation I was back then. And then this new piece I'm working on that's behind me here is actually this coyote. And it's this coyote with his kid, and he's like looking more into the future, and he's protecting. He has this gun, this shotgun, and it's more of a protective stance, and it's more peaceful, and it's more contemplative maybe. So it's interesting to see that like process, that progress in my approach, because I think a lot of this comes out subconsciously in my art. Where I'm at personally, and I'm only really starting to grapple with this, so I don't have the best words for it, but I only noticed it like last week. I was talking to my friend. I was like, yeah, I got this thing that I'm doing. It's this coyote, and he's protecting his kid, and it's like either a sunset or like fire behind him, these smoke clouds behind him. And then I was like, damn it, it's the inverse of this other painting. It's like this, but I've grown up, a little bit. So I don't know. It's been fun to kind of grapple with.
Yeah, man. I think it's very exciting to see that in an artist's work when they're starting to transition. And we've talked to other artists where they're at that point, that transition point. And obviously in this time of COVID, where we've been cooped up and been left to our own devices, right? And in our own heads a little bit more, it's been interesting to see how people are, the work is transitioned from one subject or theme, one genre to another theme, and the exploration of it. I've said it before in this podcast that I truly believe when we're done with this whole pandemic thing, that we're going to see some amazing art from people that have, just been in their studios, just working away like yourself. You're going to see some phenomenal stuff.
Yeah, totally. And I think, the adversity makes people try new things, and I feel really lucky. I feel really blessed to be able to still try new things and to not have to, like a lot of people, they're working to try and keep their apartment, and a lot of people aren't so lucky to be able to keep doing art in their studio. And so, yeah, I'm just grateful for that. And but I think the adversity you're going to see a lot of people just doing things in such unique and different ways. It's going to be great.
I want to talk about another piece, and then we're going to talk about some business.
Okay.
But before we do that, so what's the name of your band?
Malibu Nights.
Malibu Nights, and it's a country band, or what?
No,
what kind of music?
It's a synthwave band, actually. It's like pop synthwave, kind of dangerous 80s synth music. I have like this electro kit that I play on. It's
nice.
Total departure from any band or art experience that I've had. And it's actually from my friend Levi. He had these like dirty, raunchy kind of synth riffs that he had some ideas musically over. And we were talking about, what do we want to do as a band? And I said, why don't we actually try this synthwave thing? And I tell you what, that has pushed me so far musically out of my like comfort zone. There's all these technical questions that you start to deal with, and all these different musical decisions that you deal with. And then we filmed a video for it, with masks and outdoors and ventilated and everything, and skeleton crew. And visually, there's so many different artistic decisions that have like completely thrown me out of my comfort zone and into these new realms. So, yeah.
In a good way, though, because it makes you think differently, right? And there's crossover between the different mediums.
Yeah, totally. It's essentially the way we shot the video was we went to my parents' farm, and we had this blackout room that we used. We borrowed pipe and drape to film a blackout room so we could have it ventilated with masks and be safe. And we had some outdoor footage, and I got some weird costumes together. Actually, I got these helmets.
Those are nice.
That's very alien. Very cool.
Yeah. And so we got these costumes together with these robes and stuff, and just did like a kind of like throwback 80s, 90s music video, like MTV style, eye candy, bright colors, strobe lights, smoke and mirrors, and stuff like that. And yeah, totally just different artistic decisions that I would not have made sitting at my desk with a canvas.
Say that's a pretty ominous mask.
Yeah.
If the aliens decide to land in 2021 and the people the beings that walk out of that spaceship look like that, holy crap, man. I'm running.
Yeah. Yeah. The joke, we were going to do a short film at first, and we might still do it, but we were going to do like a short film where it's me pitching the music video, this ridiculous music video, to the guys in the band, and then them being like, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. You know?
and then show the video. I would love that.
Yeah.
That's like, so that's a stupid idea. I'll never. And then then they're all doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So when scene, oh, go ahead.
There's a scene in that I wrote in there. There's a few like little tricks that I won't reveal in case we do end up doing it. But there's one of the scenes where I'm like, and then Levi wakes up and he's in a blackout room and he's shirtless. And Levi's like, wait, why do I have my shirt off? He's like, I thought you would like that. He's like, I do like that.
So I have to say, when that video comes out, you need to let us know so we can link it on our Facebook page, because I want to see it and I want our listeners to see it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, and just doing stupid grandiose stuff like that. We filmed that. I just had this idea, and we have a friend who was gracious enough to lend us his like $2,000 cameras that shoot in 6K. And so we shot everything in 4K and took 1.5 terabytes of film in 30 hours, which is an insane amount of data. And then to process it, I had to get a new computer, which I needed anyway, but not a computer as beefy as I had to get. So it's really elevated the level that I can operate on visually in a lot of ways, because I had to double down and get the technology that I needed. I had to get the tools that I needed. And then, you have to get a solid state 2 terabyte drive, which is not cheap. But all of it to say that, like, when you push yourself to do these bigger projects or these things outside of your comfort zone, it can really like push you out of your comfort zone even more than you thought. Is what was exciting about this is, now I'm editing down video, and it's pushed me to say, yes, I need to invest in these better tools. It's pushed me to say, like, yes, I need to really grind on this. I really need to learn these new programs that can help my art career in different ways that I didn't even know were there before, Premiere Pro, I'm working on Premiere Pro for editing, and it's all of the tools of Photoshop, but for video. And that's 60 frames per second for 30 hours of footage. So, it's like throwing a jigsaw puzzle. Rich, actually my friend Rich Ingersoll helped film it. And at the end of it, he said, it's like you're throwing a jigsaw puzzle on the floor that only you know how to arrange, that you have to find the little half seconds and jigsaw them together. So yeah, it's pushed me out of my boundaries in ways that I didn't expect, and that's been awesome. It's been so fun.
That's really interesting to hear this whole process and how it's played into the other facets of your art. Did I mistakenly misinterpret what you said earlier? I thought earlier you said you had sent a country idea or something to one of your bandmates or something. Did I mistake that?
Yeah. We have talked about doing a country project. My friend Levi and I have talked about that.
That's where I got that.
And I need to learn guitar for that, but I haven't done it yet.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, just the synth wave for now. Yeah.
My God, I need to learn guitar for that. Shit. All right.
It'll happen, one of these days.
I love that. I mean, you're willing to push boundaries, like you said, and that's an amazing thing to do. Well, and it's kind of like when we started to do a podcast, we had to pivot to learn how to do that. But, just to say, I pitched this country idea. I got to learn to play guitar. Like, it's just like this thing that just that'll take me a week. I'll be good.
Yeah. You got to be tough when you're dumb, guys.
Well, I think there's a thing that certain people have, and that fear doesn't seem like it's part of maybe doubt is, because that's part of everybody's narrative, I think, to a certain extent. Even if you're fantastic at what you do, there's always that little bit of doubt. But fear does not seem like it plays a part in who you are as an artist or as a person. Is that correct? I don't feel like you get stopped in your tracks because you don't know whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. You're not going to let that stand in your way.
I think that's true. I think with the art world, you have an ultimate parachute as an artist, because you can just pull the ripcord and not show it to people. You can jump out of the plane and go take the whole ride, and you just be like, no, I'm not going to show this to anybody. And you just show people the successful runs, so there's something to just jumping and taking that leap and taking that chance, and just like showing people the good stuff and curating it a little bit. But yeah, it's stressful. I think you're right. It's not the fear of jumping out of the plane for me. It's the once I get into it, feeling like I'm over my head, and the growth. You have to be afraid not be afraid to let yourself grow, I guess would be. Because I could do these plexiglass paintings, and I could do the wood carved stuff, and I could do all the same approach that I've always done, and probably have about the same success for as long as I want. But I don't want to just do the same thing forever. So I don't know. Call me crazy.
No, I don't think that's crazy at all. And that was really well said. I don't think we've ever had somebody express it the way that you do. We've kind of briefly discussed it in other episodes, but I think that's well said. That art is an environment where you can feel safe to fail, right? It gives you carte blanche to experiment and do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. Big deal, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there's this pressure that people put on themselves to always make the next best thing, and I don't know what I'm saying with this, guys. I think it's just about you should just try it if you want to do it. And that's part of where I feel lucky as an artist, is I've always just approached it as like, I just want to do this thing. And if it's good, then I'll release it. If it's not, then I won't. And if people like it, then I'll sell it. And if they don't, then I won't. And I'll get a different job if I can't sell it, and that's given me a lot of freedom to be able to do these wacky things, that's like, make a music video. I don't know.
That's awesome.
I love this. Call Me Ishmael.
Yeah.
Piece. That's a great piece.
Thank you.
It's just so different from the Western stuff. You spoke to me before when we made the initial contact about how it's been a little bit difficult to figure out where you kind of fit in, right? Like you don't fit into the traditional Western art type of thing. And, and because it's graphic in its appearance, it kind of gets people kind of see the whole comic book side of things. And then it doesn't fit into the whole contemporary idea of what Western art is either. It's really its own thing, which I think is magnificent, by the way. It might be a harder sell, but I think, there's always going to be a group of people that it resonates with no matter what. It's just finding that audience, right?
Yeah. This Call Me Ishmael and At the Edge were actually a series that I was working on that I never really got to finish because the Western stuff kind of hit this trajectory right about that same time. And they were like old classic stories. Like At the Edge is St. George and the Dragon, and Call Me Ishmael is Moby Dick. And that goes back, like we've been talking, Todd, that storytelling, like these single image stories. Instead of the white whale, you got the white owl. And, You got these ravens instead of whaling boats, and it's interesting to find an audience with that, because you need people to really notice it. You need people to really take a look at it, to kind of see the depth of it.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. And then
thank you.
Before we move on here, then we have this piece entitled Lazy Sunday, and it's completely different than anything else, right?
Yeah.
And I love it. I don't know. It's very interesting. If you spend a little bit of time on it, it's on the pop surrealism part of Cody's portfolio. I don't know. Spend some time with it. I think there's some really interesting things going on with it. Do you want to talk about it at all?
That one's actually hanging in my studio still. I probably won't ever sell it, even if I had an offer.
Really?
It's one of the first big serious kind of paintings that I did. So it's a little dated on the site, honestly, but I think it still holds up as being a good work, and just so weird. I would do these kind of freedom of thought kind of sketches and just do simple line work and then translate them into these weird pop surreal paintings. And I don't do as much of that anymore as I ever did. But I remember finishing that one, and I've since updated the color since I finished it the first time. I went through and I redid the color a few years later. But I remember showing my dad painting. He's like, well, I don't get it. I don't get it. And I was like, well, probably not my demo, Dad, but yeah, I don't get it either. Totally.
It's really interesting, man. How old is that piece?
That's probably 12 years old. I'm surprised I still have it on my website, to be honest.
I think it's great. I'd leave it up there. It's just it's just such an interesting, it's just so different from the rest of your work, And so I don't know. I love it. I love the concept behind it, and it's just really cool. And then I forgot, there's at the bottom here, there's a very powerful series. It's called Refugee, the Refugees series. And that to me is incredibly pertinent, to where we're at and what's going on in the world. And I think it's interesting that you started to explore that. Have you continued with that series at all? Is that something that you just did a handful of pieces and then, you got busy with other things?
Yeah. In the perfect world, I would do a lot more of those, because I think it's powerful to talk about habitat for animals as well as people. You have refugees that are not just human beings, and you have endangered groups that aren't just animals. And so I wanted to kind of mash those up. So these are really digital photo editing, grabbing different images and then fine tuning them digitally, with illustration and color, and then trying to find different groups that are marginalized or endangered or at risk, and the issues behind them. Like the number 2 one there is the orangutan, and they're just getting burned out of their habitat because palm plantations, because we love palm oil so much. And yeah, I really do have a lot of fun with those. It's if I could do more, I would, but I gotta, feed the pony. So I gotta sell the work, and those don't sell as well because they're a little darker.
Yeah. I would love to see more of this series at some point, man. I love how you've paralleled, the environment with, animals and humans, and the connection that we all have, because that's a huge thing. We're not stewards of the land anymore, and we're going to pay the ultimate price if we don't turn the tide here pretty soon. So yeah. I love what you've done with this series.
Yeah, thank you. I think the thing that stands out to me the most about these is the fact that they're almost more human with animal faces to people. They're humanized in a way that they wouldn't be. The audience has responded to them in a way that is more empathetic because they have animal heads, maybe would be the way to say it.
And that's why I love it. I love how you've paired the two.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, those were, yeah, I wish I could do more of those.
All right, we're going to pivot to the business side of things. So obviously this year has been really bizarre, and we've talked to multiple artists. I know that in the beginning of this pandemic, some people got just stopped in their tracks. They're like, oh my God, shows got canceled. You mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that you had shows that were canceled, even just last minute, like the day before or what have you. Talk about how this year has been for you. And, you alluded to the fact that you started thinking in different ways, that it was more about producing work as opposed to, because of the situation you were in, and thinking more about the business side. Like, what am I going to do to make this machine go in this weird time that we're in?
Yeah. And so my personal experience with this is predicated a lot on the fact that I have the network already built up. Like, I have the artist network, I have the gallery network, I have the reason that I've been able to be successful is because I have that in my back pocket already, or I had that going into this. So it's not something that I think is like a easy fix for artists. I'm like, you just do this. All you gotta do is, because some of the things that I say will sound kind of right. Like, oh, I just got some galleries and I just talked to some galleries and I've got some new spaces. And a lot of people are like, yeah, that's not an option for me. So I don't want to like diminish other artists' experience in this time. What happened at the start of this year, my essential plan was, do a festival every month, some kind of art festival every month, have some gallery representation, have some social media sales, and then have, about 30% of my business with commissions before this too. I kind of saw this coming way back January, February, because I had heard some news and was actually taking it pretty seriously, even as early as February, March, and March is when the big shutdown happened, of course. So I was kind of seeing it on the horizon, and personally, before all of it shut down, I had told myself for 4 years, I don't want to schlep a tent and sit in hot weather in a tent for 2 days and drive for 2 days. And, I don't want to do festivals anymore. Personally, I just have gotten to the point where I don't like them, but that was like 30% of my income. So this year was a good test case for that, to see if I could do without them, because there's none of them. So essentially I figured out, I need to do what I've always wanted to do, is find new places to sell work, both traditional and non-traditional. So I have a couple stores that I sell at that are just like gift and hobby stores. So I have small prints and paper prints and stuff like that.
And what stores are these, if I could ask real quick? Tell our listeners.
Yeah, like I heard Denver is down in downtown Denver. Ohana is up in Steamboat. I have Country Wyoming Home is up in Cheyenne, and those are kind of just decor or gift stores. They have art and they do either wholesale or consignment. And picked up a couple more of those, and then there was a couple galleries that I've been fortunate enough, like Blue Moose in Fort Collins, I just got into. I did an application. They had reached out to me. And then the galleries that I've already been working with, Gallery 1505 in Denver, and then Valkyrie Gallery I was a member of prior to this year. And they're both great. And then Lovetts Gallery out in Tulsa reached out early this year. And they've been awesome to work with.
So part of that was just being lucky to have some of that infrastructure, to have some of these galleries that I'm showing at already, and to be able to just expand that footprint just a little bit. But part of what happened then was I didn't realize that my inventory needed to go up. I needed to actually have 5 times the inventory, because you need to have, instead of having enough to fit just a square tent, you need enough to fit a display at 5 different stores or 8 different stores now. So that's been a real learning curve this year, is to get enough inventory ordered in a timely way to get out to the galleries and to mail it and all that stuff and to hang it and stuff. So yeah, business has really pivoted to being this kind of monoculture almost in a way, whereas before it was like 30 shows, commissions, just regular straight sales. So now it's 100%, well, it's probably like 50-50 now, gallery and social media, trying to put out work. But with that pivot to social media and galleries, that means that also you have to like have knockout content, like you can't just go to a different show in a different city and sell the same type of prints and have new people seeing it. You have to give an audience new content so that your audience grows, so there's a different kind of pressure there. All of a sudden it's like, now it's not just seeing 100 people or 1,000 people in a day, in a weekend, and expanding my audience. It's, you have to have better content online for it so that people see it and and that grows. And I think I just repeated myself a little bit, but does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yep.
it does make sense.
It sure does.
Absolutely.
You just clarified the point. You didn't repeat it. You clarified the point.
Good.
I do that all the time.
Yeah, I didn't repeat myself. I knew what I was doing. Yeah. So it's been a weird year. One of the things I had to do was actually, we still had a gallery show, an opening at Valkyrie Gallery that was May. It was supposed to be April, but it got pushed back because the closure, they couldn't be open for a month. And then they did openings with ticketed, restricted, occupancy. So mine was a month late in a different room. But leading up to it, we have the kids, and my studio is in a detached garage, and usually my painting time is at night. So painting at night, or I had school with the girls, so painting at night really wasn't an option because the girls are inside and I can't just leave them
to their own devices.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Unintended.
Yeah. So I actually pivoted to doing more of my work digitally this year. And I've done 4 or 5 different of the layered plexiglass pieces digitally and had it printed onto plexiglass. And this might be, I don't know if this is trade secret territory for my work, but I'll go there for now. So one of the things about my work that I've done business wise is I make my original art, right? And I do the big layered piece, and that's the big coup de grace piece. And my traditional model was to just make paper and canvas prints of that, right? And one of the things I figured out was if I'm printing, I'll get the black lines printed on plexiglass. So I'll do one big one, and then I started doing a bunch of the minis. And I make a mini plexiglass, and I'll make these mini pieces that are like 11 by 14 or 11 by 17, and hand paint a background for it, and then hand paint in the color. And that has allowed me to monetize my work in a different way than I could before, because people want the original and they want, the $3,000 30 by 40 piece. But I got this $400 11 by 14 piece there, and that's limited, and it's still original, and it's still fun for me to do personally, which is pretty important. And it allows me to express myself in different ways. Because I'll be a little safer with the bigger ones color-wise, because I know people want a statement piece for their home. But for these smaller ones, a lot of times I can go crazy with the color and, do the neons and do the pinks and do, paint on both sides of it and have a separate expression of the person on the other side. It's also, if you're talking financials, if we're talking like base financials, it allows you to sell a piece and then monetize it for higher dollar increments in between. And that I don't mean to be indelicate about like sometimes artists just need to talk dollars and cents. There's such a thing as monetizing a piece of art. You have to do it to survive if you want to be a living artist. So this is one way that I found for myself to do my work in a different way that allows me to sell a piece and then sell new originals of that piece and pretty much double the amount of money I can make on it. Does that sound too indelicate?
No, I think that's right on.
Yeah, very well thought out. Just like everything that you do in the process of this episode, you've explained. I just think you're smart, man. Like,
thank you.
you want to have the freedom to do what you want to do, and in order to have this freedom that artists so desire, and it's a great life, but you want to, you want to. As our friend would say, Bob Ragland. There you go, Wes.
There's Bob Ragland.
You got to heat and eat, to put it quite simply, right?
Yeah.
You got to heat and eat, and everybody has a different, idea of what that looks like. What you spend your money on, et cetera, et cetera. But the bottom line is having the ability to do what you want to do and not have to answer to anybody. You do have to in a roundabout way, because the people that buy your work, obviously you're answering to. Yeah. But finding multiple revenue streams, I think, is the key. And that's what you've done. And you made a really great point. Like, a lot of people will buy prints, right? I'm sure you sell a lot of prints. But at the same time, there's a certain percentage of the art buying population that wants some kind of original. I'm one of those guys. I probably will not buy a print. Yeah. I would love to have an original. I think if I come home, and I would love to have one of your big pieces, I really would. I would put that in my house in a heartbeat. But if I come home and I tell my wife that I just spent $7,000 on this beautiful original Cody Kuehl, no matter how long I've been married and how much my wife says she loves me, she might be a little bit pissed that I just spent $7,000, especially if I didn't consult her beforehand. And maybe it would be a different scenario, I guess, if we were in an agreement, right?
Yeah.
But not everybody can, and we hear this from other artists. We've heard it multiple times. I couldn't afford to buy my own art in some cases, right? Like they wouldn't spend, nor could they afford to spend that amount of money. There is a segment of the population that can do that. But $400, and I showed my wife your art, because she was curious of who we were talking to today. Nice. She's like, "Oh, I really dig it." Yeah, I knew she would. I know her after 21 years of marriage. I know what her tastes are, and she was, it resonated with her. But again, $7,000 or $400, it's a lot easier sell at $400.
Yeah. Well, and it allows me to progress personally as an artist. It's something that gives me creative freedom in a different way. It gives me a chance to still provide people with original art. It has streamlined my process to make art that I can sell. And there's been a lot of positives about it. And I haven't really heard a lot of pushback from, buyers. They're like, "Yeah, okay, cool. It's original." I'm like,
I think that's the key right there. They're still getting an original piece. And it may be based on something else, but the colors are different. Maybe it's different in other elements. It's democratization of artwork for the masses. And most people can afford $300-$400 to put down on a piece of original art, and you can buy the $40 prints from someplace else, or, not yours are $40, but, other people. And that's fine too. There's nothing wrong with that. At the end of the day, if we can, we as buyers can pay for artwork to keep you producing, that's the win-win,
Yeah. I think there's this dangerous precedent in the art world right now. And it's this kind of, I think the best word I have for it is like this kind of puritanical sense of it, of what art should be. And I've kind of touched on this before of like, you should just get representation, and then you just sell these $10,000 paintings all day at these big time galleries. And it's like, there's other ways to monetize art. And it's hard to say without sounding indelicate as an artist, but artists have to feel liberated that selling prints is okay. Selling prints is fine. There's this puritanical sense that like, oh, you can't sell prints of anything unless it's the absolute masterpieces that you see in the biggest museums.
Right.
And then you can give it on the friggin' coffee mug, can get a Monet on a coffee mug at the museum where they're displaying it, but don't you dare do that yourself.
Right.
So I think artists can feel the liberation to know that it's okay to sell prints, and it's okay to try to find a way. Essentially, you want a product that's innovative and unique and a good price and priced well for people in the right marketplace and in the right space. And that's just running a business. And I think there's this pie in the sky version of art that isn't business oriented. It's feeling oriented, and it's this idea that it has to be this certain way. And I think it's just from where I came from, it's never been the case for me that galleries just were like, hey, we want to have your paintings, and just we're going to sell them all day, and I've had a lot of luck with galleries doing that here and there, but that's not like my only experience. I wouldn't be able to do this professionally if I just did that. So coming up with different looks for people is just important. Part of like what was really cool about that Red Wolf crew is we would do events, and we would do shows together. Like we did the Holiday Bazaar at, the Sports Castle in Denver. And we had a couple times where we had new artists that had not had that experience. And they're like, well, what do I need to do? And we're like, well, you get some prints and you bag them up and you put a backer in them, sell them for $20, sell them for $30. And they're like, really? That's it. Where do I get that done? And I'm like, you get it done here and here, like
Right.
These are the companies that can do that. There's some pragmatism there that's kind of boots on the ground. That's just like, you just got to do it, but that's not an experience that everybody has, because there's this ideal way to do it. I was talking to that RimCAD group, and I think it's important, if you're making these decisions, you need to make them kind of candidly with yourself as to what do I want to do with art? Do I want to make hyper-specific political art that probably won't sell, but make a statement? That's good, but that's a pretty specific choice.
Right.
Do I want to make art for myself that I enjoy, that if people buy it, then great? Do I want to paint, bombastic landscapes that, I can sell for days? Great. It's deciding what you want your approach to be, because there's doors that I've closed for myself with, I think there's doors, if I were to assume, there's doors that I've closed for myself by advertising that I have prints for sale, or advertising that I do business in this way, or showing at iHeart Denver, because that's like a lowbrow, that's not like a purist art community. And that's not saying that that it's wrong to approach art that way, in this fine art, high blue chip gallery kind of approach. God, I wish I could be in a blue chip gallery, because that would be so much easier than what I'm doing. But, to have that approach be different isn't bad. It's just you're doing it in a different way. And there's different gradations of that. And yeah, I've always just said, I'm just going to, if I don't have the opportunity, I'm going to create it. I'm going to explore all the avenues. I'm going to try the different ways. And yeah, it's been interesting. It's been quite a ride.
So, I mean, we've talked to a number of artists like Michael Untied. He tried the print part when he was early on, and he does more of the traditional Old West style oil paintings, and it didn't work for him. And he found that his patrons wanted just original art. So he went back, and now he does just originals. And when he needed more money, he did what he called Little Charlies. And so he'd do these little studies. He would auction them off, and he'd start them at like $100, and they would sell for more than that. And that was a way for him to recoup some money when times are a little short. And then there's other people that were like, I do my original art and I want to sell them, and they sell well, but I want to share my art with a lot of people. So they do prints, and they'll sell their prints for $40, and they're completely happy. And they justify it because they want to see people that can't afford their original work enjoy their work in their home as well. And I think whatever approach you take, as long as you being authentic to yourself and following your own, goals, like you said, goals that you set as a business. There's nothing wrong with it. People that get really highbrow about their, this is how art is and this is what art is. Yeah. Who cares?
Yeah. And part of what I've realized over the years is that your audience can sometimes help dictate what your capacity to sell is. Like my old Pop Surreal stuff is pretty lowbrow. It's a younger demographic that likes it. It's a demographic that doesn't have quite as much money to spend on original art or space for a 2 foot by 4 foot painting. So for that, I would do cons and lowbrow shows and sell paper prints and canvas prints and merch and stuff like that, and make about the same amount of money as I would from selling originals. And with this Western stuff, what I've seen is that there's an audience that's a little bit older. It's like 35 to 55, pretty evenly balanced between men and women. But it's the people that are interested are starting to want the bigger pieces, the higher dollar pieces. So now I've transitioned less into paper prints and canvas prints and looking to make a unique original art and unique limited art for people. The digital ones that I explained, I was talking about, they're printed onto plexiglass. So it's all printed on. I can make those, and theoretically I could make 1 million of them. It's like the classic, oh yeah, this is just numbered. It's a numbered print. It's numbered to 1,000. You're like, oh yeah, it's pretty limited. It's numbered to as many as I can sell. I don't know.
Right.
So I've kept these big originals, and I've made a concerted attempt to say that I'm only going to do 5 of those, and then I'm not going to make paper prints of these because they're digital. I'm not going to do canvas prints of these. Because what I want you to have is a limited artifact, even if it's not original. And I can do hand embellishments, and I can do the signature and numbered, and that's giving people just a different way to engage the work and to feel like they have something that's unique. And that's been a change. It's I have a ton of paper prints sitting in this bin down here that I'm like, man, I wish I could sell all these, but it's not where the business is going. It's not what my audience wants right now. So, yeah.
I think you're really smart, Cody. And we've talked to a number of artists. When you're able to offer something for everyone, the artists that are able to make that kind of offering, I feel are really successful because they have, like we discussed before, multiple revenue streams. So I want you to speak about what all you offer people and where, if you wouldn't mind just talking where each one of those falls as far as price range.
Yeah. So lowest price range is like $25 paper prints. And usually, if any new artists are out there, please, for the love of God, make your paper prints a standard size. For like 8 years, I've had these like oddly sized rectangles that I've had to cut down a mat board and then fold over, and it's like an extra step for every single print that you bag. So crop your images to a standard frame size and a standard board size if you do it. If anybody new is listening to this, is a really helpful thing because it's easier to put 11 by 17 board in, 11 by 17 print in, bag it up. It saves you a cut, saves you a fold. So yeah, lowest canvas prints or lowest paper prints on my website are there. I still have t-shirts on my website, but I'm trying to run those out because that's a really high inventory load. $10 a t-shirt. You have to get 100 done. You're in for $1,000 and you're going to sit on them for at least 6 months, so it's really high inventory financially to carry. Then I do 20 by 30 paper prints that I've done for between 50 and 75, depending on the print. And then I do mini canvases, the little gift stores. I do mini canvases that I usually do for 95, and those are 11 by 14, 11 by 17. They're kind of essentially the way I look at pricing for all of these different offerings is to like have the no-brainer upsell, where if you have like an 11 by 17 print for 25 and then a 20 by 30 print, which is 4 times bigger, for 50, then you're like, well, that'd be stupid not to spend $50. And you just make $25 more.
Right.
And that's just, it sounds really indelicate as an artist, to talk about things, but I really want people to know that there's like, you have to try and be a little business savvy about it. And you have to be honest with yourself about being a business person. And you have to talk that way. Sometimes you don't talk to your customers that way, but yeah. And then the mini canvases are like, okay, I got this paper print, 11 by 17 paper print that's 25, or this canvas that's hang ready. I don't have to go buy a frame for 95, and it's a good product, and people feel like, oh, well, that's pretty cheap. And then I do the $325 mini plexiglass pieces, and that's where the original offerings kind of start, is in that range. And those kind of go from $325 to $450. And actually, when I started rolling those out, I was selling them for $150. And I've kind of bumped up the price as I've gone because the demand has been pretty robust for those. So then from there, you have your different canvas sizes, and that's when I start getting to full size limited canvas that I do embellishments on. So like I'll do a 24 by 48 canvas, and those usually I just keep it like 55 cents per square inch is how I calculate those, based on what I'm getting them for and what I'm selling them for. And so if 24 by 48 is about $650. And then I'll number those to 25 for that kind of limited release. And I hand embellish those as well, which has been really kind of fun. Like some of my really classic pieces classic to me, I'm not sure if anybody else considers them classic, but I get to revisit those and paint them better almost sometimes, which is really cool. It's really a fun experience to like dig in and pop all the colors out and just re-experience that creative process and learn from my past work. And then from there, it's just the originals. And then, I just have, I think it's like $2.50 per square inch for the original stuff. I could do the math on it, but, I try and look at that size wise between $1,500 and $3,000. If I do something grandiose like that big wood carved piece, I put a stupid price tag on it because it's a stupid big piece. So that's pretty much how it cracks out. And then you need to look at how you're putting your pieces, where you're putting your pieces on the table. You look at your canvas prints and your dink and dunk kind of stuff as your pawns, and you don't want to put your pawns in the big gallery, that you want to sell a $10,000 piece at. I have my pawns at the gift stores and the different, trade stores. And then, you look at your heavy hitters and you want to put those in places of consequence, that somebody will notice it and somebody will have the money to buy it. And then you don't want to mix them in places where there might be, you want to know your audience. So like Denver Comic Con, I bring everything because everything's, you get the big stuff on the wall and it looks super cool. And then you direct your eyes down to the cheaper stuff. And, big galleries, you just hang big pieces, or like Park City, Utah. I took stuff there, and I don't bring prints to Park City, Utah. I bring original stuff to Park City, Utah, because there's, millionaires and billionaires live there. So
right.
That's what I want to sell to there. So you got to look what's on the board. And that's been harder this year to navigate, is to know where to put the pieces that are on the board in what spot on the board, because that can kill your revenue just as fast as anything. If you have a gallery that you're never going to sell an original piece, but they could sell the shit out of, some prints that's, you need to know what to put there. So having that in the back of your mind as well is very valuable. And that's harder with that being the sole thing that I have this year, so.
And I would think the gallerists would know what sells, like what style. So they should be pretty attuned to here's what we're looking for. And I'm sure there's galleries like, we don't want prints. We don't want anything that even close, because it's all original art. So they should be able to help you as an artist to select what will sell.
Yeah.
Theoretically.
Theoretically. I like Lovetts Gallery is top tier. They're one of the best galleries I've worked with. They don't want to know just what I think they want. They know what they want. And they've done great by me for that. Gallery 1505 has been the same. She knows the pieces that she wants and the pieces that her audience will buy. So yeah, it's good.
Your website is really nicely laid out, and I can, not only do you communicate well with your art, but it's also well put together. Did you put that website together as far as doing all the verbiage and everything?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, that's been a process. I've been trying to keep up with it better too. That's my Achilles heel, is just keeping it current,
I think that's every artist's Achilles heel, is just trying to keep up with updating everything. You only have so much time in your day, right? And it seems like the website, if you're selling work, then you don't feel like you need to address it, but you know that you need to address it. So it's kind of it's a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah. Well, and something that I've noticed this year is without the festivals, it was before I was thinking, well, I'll just go to this festival and I'll sell the work anyway, Well, if I'm going to Park City, it's 8 hours in a car, and then I'm not making work that day at all. And then it's 2 days of sitting in a tent, which you're really not making work at either. And 1 day drive back. So that's 4 work days. That's almost a whole work week. What can you do with your online presence in 4 whole days of work? And I've been trying to convince myself that I should do that work. Right. But if you reframe what your time is, where you're spending your time, you can see a lot of waste all of a sudden, because my time to create is my most valuable time, but my time to promote is second, at least. So what can your online reach be, especially as targeted as you can make it online? I go to an art festival, there's 1 in 100 people likes my art, and one of those, 10% of those 1 in 100 want to buy it, and 10% have enough money to buy it, kind of thing. Whereas online, you can dial into, oh, this is my demographic. I want people that like Stephen King's Dark Tower or something. Yeah. So there's new things that I'm trying to get better at than my old model of, shotgun, do all the events and spend all your time standing in front of your art, and trying to be more direct and conscious about where I'm putting stuff.
All these offerings that you mentioned before, people can find these via your website, correct?
Yep. Yeah, I have those all on the website. Links to a Square store. I need to probably switch that up. I'd like to get the store on the website, but yeah.
Kind of streamline it a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's the next step, is to make it seamless so you don't feel like you're getting this, exit portal. And then I also re-engineered my store recently to try and prioritize the stuff that I want to sell more of, which is the higher dollar stuff. So yeah.
Gotcha. You said 30% of your income, at least pre-COVID, it has been commissions. What kind of commissions do you do for people?
I've there's been a lot of really cool stuff and some weird stuff. Some of it's just design work, illustration for covers and stuff like that of different things.
Covers, you mean like?
I did a catalog cover for one company, just an illustration, like that pool hall scene that I have is an illustration that was for a pool supply company, like the
Yeah.
Billiards.
Billiards.
not not a pool, not like water pool. And then a lot of stuff is just like unique ideas that people have. They're like, I like this, and I want this style of this thing. One of my favorite commissions that I got. This is also an advocacy to do even your lowbrow events. I did Mancraftable, or no, it was Mancraft, and one of my best collectors saw me at Mancraft with my $85 canvases up, and he's like, I like this. Can you do it like this big, like 6 foot, like that big? And I was like, yeah, I can do that. So we get together and he says, all right, I want a guy from behind, and he just like shot this other guy, and I want the guy like lying, like dying on the ground behind him. And I want this whorehouse over here. And I want them all reacting to it. And I'm like, yeah, you can do all of that. And so, that kind of stuff where people have an idea in their mind and they want to, realize it. So, yeah.
In that section of Cody's website, when you go on there, he really spells out the whole process. And God, I think that's so smart that there's a lot of communication that goes into the whole process of doing a commission, and you laid out your whole process there, so people know exactly what they're going to get into and what to expect when they commission you to do something.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a huge thing. I've commissioned art before, and I've had a couple times where it's like, it's not exactly what I wanted, but yeah, it's cool, And I think there's some trepidation for people, especially first timers, if they want to commission something, that you want to have really clear guidelines. And it's easy for my process, because usually I do, I tell people we're going to do rough sketches. So you're going to get these basic ideas of what your things you're telling me look like. But then you have to have really clear expectations for each step as well, to protect yourself, so that once I'm done with rough sketches, we're not going back to the conceptualization phase. We're not going back to that. Once I finish that, this is what we're running with. And then I do a final drawing, and then you get a round of edits. And once we're done with that, we ain't going back to the drawing phase. So when we start the painting phase, and it just gives accountability to both sides, so that you can say, all right, this is when we need to go to billable hours if you want me to go back a step. So it's not just for the customer, it's for the artist too. And it allows me to give a final product that the person has control over, instead of, I want this, and then it goes into a magic box and whatever comes out. So, yeah.
Takes all the guesswork out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
That's smart.
It's just communicating,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you're a communication guy, man.
Hey, thank you.
That's what I like about you. And last but not least, let's talk about social media and selling art off social media. How important is social media to your business model as an artist, and what platforms work for you as far as selling art?
I think social media it's just so integral to sharing your art anymore. It's like, compared to the days before social media, I think it's a revolution for artists. I think you'd be crazy not to, unless you are of a certain, if your approach, I guess, is to have hyper authentic originals hanging in blue chip galleries, and it's never been photographed, it's never been exposed to film, then you'd want to do that. You would not want to share it on social media. Does that make sense? Yeah. But just to build your audience, I mean, it's a crazy powerful tools. They're getting less powerful, I think, with the algorithms that you're starting to see with Facebook. Facebook, I've seen a reduction in my traffic, just organic traffic, by 50% over the last 2 years. The kind of reach that I was getting compared to when they started tweaking the algorithm has significantly changed what it is. And I think Instagram is good, but you're starting to see some of the same stuff. So yeah, I think it's just huge. You got to keep up on your social media. You got to have new content. You got to have better content. It's a lot easier than doing some of these festivals like I was talking about. So just connecting in new ways and having new art that I can show people is a good way to just keep current with people. And I think that's something that you want, I have festivals where I have recurring clients that come back and they'll sometimes buy and they sometimes won't, but you have to kind of think of it the same way that you keep top of people's mind, that you keep scratching that itch and you keep giving people new things. And then you say, okay, well, I have prints of this now, and go to the website all of a sudden, and so I'm terrible at it. I don't post near enough. And, I try and post only my top tier content though. Yeah. I think you just have to do it. Instagram, if you're using Instagram, you got to use your hashtags right, or else you got nothing. And actually I'm considering going to TikTok as well, which you got to try new stuff. It's the same as everything I've been talking about.
Right. Here's my idea about TikTok is, I think it's a great platform, especially I really like the time lapse. And I've said this before, I like the time lapse art piece because I think people really get a kick out of seeing, from start to finish the process in, a minute and a half or a minute or whatever. And then I notice that people, there's a lot of people that's making money just off of being on TikTok and Instagram. Like that's their job. They're doing it 100%. They don't have another job. Yeah. But they're really, and TikTok's really good about linking your Instagram page and your Facebook too. So I see a lot of TikTokers driving traffic to their Instagram, and then they have a fans only page that they have people subscribe to. So I could see an artist having a fans only page, and then you get to see just exclusive stuff on that. That's what I'm picking up from a lot of these young influencers on TikTok. Well, not even young, they're all over, but so I think that's an interesting model. They're using it to capture a large audience because I think, like you said, with Instagram and Facebook, they're crunching down their algorithms. So there's fewer people seeing your stuff. And I believe they're doing that to have you boost it to monetize more money for them. But this is still wide open territory. And then you drive them to your Instagram page and your fans only page and make revenue off that.
Yeah. And it's cross-pollination with all of it. And it's great for telling people where you are and where they can find your stuff in real life. But it's, I've had pretty decent sales off of just Instagram, of canvas prints and people wanting a certain thing and just accessibility. It's 10 times as much work as if you just had the traditional sales model of going to a gallery. But you have a lot more potential for sales too. So
what percentage of your sales would you guesstimate comes via social media?
Probably 25% anymore this year.
It's a good amount.
Yeah. It's sales and it's commissions. So it's sometimes you get these big hits and you just never know where it's going to come from, for sure. I've had people that saw me on Instagram and bought original pieces and saw and bought prints, and just got to do all of it. Secret to being your own boss is you can work any 16 hours a day you want.
And that's the truth. This 16 hours a day. Yeah. People that are inherently lazy, that don't want to put in 80 hours a week. Yeah. I probably shouldn't be self-employed. Yeah. That's probably why I still have a day job.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's trying a lot of new things. And it's interesting being an artist because you're not just an artist ever. Yeah. You have to be an artist and you have to be a social media presence. You don't have to be a social media celebrity or an Instagram celebrity, but you have to have a social media presence, and you have to be a website designer, and you have to be a salesperson. Sometimes, you have to talk to people about selling your art. Like I have a line that, when I was initially selling my art where people were like, well, this is really cheap. You're selling this for kind of cheap. And I'm like, well, you got a deal today. Then let me tell you, you should buy it if it's so cheap. So cheap. So then you just pull the trigger, man.
Right. I sold it. I made it this cheap specifically today, specifically for you.
Yeah. I wanted to sell it.
You said something in an interview that I thought was really interesting. You said, I think the smartest thing I ever did was to separate my art business income from my work income. So now we're kind of talking about emerging artists that have a full-time job or a part-time job. Yep. And then you said, I never leveraged anything against it. I never borrowed anything to do the art business, and I did not spend it on frivolous things. I think that's really smart. Can you address that just briefly?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good catch, Wes. Did your research? When I started, that was one of the first best things I did was, you have a big art sale or you get lucky and you have an early initial sale and you're like, I'm going to go buy a PlayStation. And you don't have that money anymore. But part of running an art business is establishing an art business and building an art business. So it has to be a business. So it has to have business income and business expenses. So what I realized quickly is you have to have cash flow. And cash doesn't just flow one way, artists. It flows both ways. You have in and out. It goes in and out. And if you're doing it right, you have more coming in because you're buying things cheaper and selling them for more expensive. So segregating that income, if you're trying to build an art business, gives you a cushion to have the expenses. Because it's a pretty expense-driven endeavor to start a business. So if you think about it, you need $1,000 on hand to apply to some of these shows or to pay for the booth fee at some of these shows. So that's not just like cash that's just lying around at any given moment when I was an emerging artist. So to work full-time and have that pay all my bills, and then to take that next step and have that art income in the bank, then you start looking, like I was saying, you look at placing these pieces, you look at buying the pieces of art, you look at buying the pieces to play your business game with. So my initial investment was a shitty pop-up tent and some hangers so I could hang it off the side of this tent and some paper prints, and then $500 for Steamboat Springs Art Fest. And then I made a big painting sale there, sold $1,000 painting. This has been 12 years ago. But, then you put that into your art account and then you start buying canvas prints that you can embellish and you can sell, or renting a studio space that you can show at. And so it's just cash flow, and it's giving yourself space. You have to have runway if you're going to have a business. So, and that's just starting a business, and it's going to take 3 to 5 years. And that's if your artwork is marketable. So, yeah. And my artwork wasn't very marketable, apparently, because it took me like 9.
But you got to pay your dues. You got to pay your dues.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, that's being in with your audience. And some people just have just this crazy talent that they can just put stuff up and it's amazing and they sell stuff, and kudos to them. Glad they can take that to the bank. But the average artist, your average person, is going to you're not only going to develop your business acumen and your business presence, but you're going to develop as an artist too. And your artwork will get better, and you'll get better at talking to people. And eventually you hit this moment where your art does all the talking, and I want to get there. So that's where the main goal is: make better art. I don't know. It's working so far.
It's a marathon, not a sprint, right?
Totally. Yeah. And you can't just have these high, lofty expectations and think that it's just going to come easy. Cause I mean, it might for some people, but if you really want it, you got to go and take it. So.
Right on. Cody Kuehl, man, we unpacked a lot in this episode, and I cannot thank you enough for taking time away from your family on a Sunday afternoon or morning afternoon now, and away from your work, because time is money and time is precious to an artist. So thank you for sharing your knowledge. Thank you for what you do. And it was just been an honor and a privilege.
Hey, thank you guys. It's a great time. I appreciate you guys asking such thoughtful questions and really getting in. And I think it's important to share this kind of stuff. So yeah, appreciate you giving me the platform.
Well, we really appreciate it. I can't wait to see your stuff live. Hopefully we can come down to your studio sometime and shoot an episode live and get some more valuable information. But you brought a lot of stuff for, especially, I think, emerging artists. If they're listening, they're going to have some value to walk away with. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to have to clean the studio a lot if you're going to do a video here. I think Hannah would be mortified if we had a video camera in here. It's crazy.
Again, Cody's website is artofcodykuehl.com. It will be in the episode notes as always, and they can find you on social media where, Cody?
It's Art of Cody Kuehl on Instagram and Facebook.com/Art of Cody Kuehl. And if you want to just send me money, it's Square, is my handle's at Art of Cody Kuehl.
That's awesome.
Or not Square, it's Venmo.
Venmo.
Yeah.
Fantastic. For the Tenet Podcast, I'm Todd Pearson.
And I'm Wes Brown.
Have a great week.